In the last lecture, we talked about how Shays' Rebellion really convinced Americans that the Articles of Confederation was not working and we needed to either revise it or come up with a new system of government. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about what they came up with. So a new convention meets in Philadelphia on May 25th, 1787. If you think, and it's going to meet in Independence Hall, the same place where they signed the Declaration of Independence, where they signed and came up with the Articles of Confederation, and where they're going to decide on this new government. Now there's 55 delegates that show up. They come from all of the states except Rhode Island. Rhode Island wanted nothing to do with coming up with a new government. They're a small state. They do not believe in a strong central government, and they send no delegates. They think if they stay away, then maybe they can't change the Declaration of the Articles of Confederation, but they're mistaken. Now, 8 of these people that met at the convention had signed the Declaration of Independence, including Ben Franklin. George Washington was representing Virginia, and Washington was so well respected because of his great ability to lead the Continental Army in the American Revolution that he was elected president of the convention. But really, the people that come there are kind of a next generation. Some younger guys. 2 of the most important are Alexander Hamilton, who despised the Articles of Confederation. He thought this was a terrible system. But the most prepared person there is James Madison. James Madison. In fact, James Madison is called the father of the Constitution. He's just a little guy. He's a little short guy. He's quiet. But with him, he has suitcases full of books about law and legal systems from all over the world. He is the most prepared person there. They meet in secret. They don't want anybody to hear what's going on. They lock themselves in the room. They close the windows. And it's summer. Remember, it's May. Okay, it's hot. The people in the north there in their woolen suits, they suffer a great deal. People in the south, they're used to the hot weather, and they're less affected by the heat. And I think that is going to come into play later on in this lesson. We'll talk about that. Okay, but what they decide that, man, no matter what, they cannot come up with a way to revise the Articles of Confederation. Just not happening. So they're going to write a whole new constitution, a whole new system of government. Now, while most everybody there agrees that the Articles of Confederation needs to be replaced, you're going to see that there's going to be 2 rival plans, and it's going to be the debate is really between large states and small states. All right, remember that. Large states with a large population and small states with a small population. Well, the first plan that's introduced is the Virginia Plan. The Virginia Plan is proposed by Edmund Randolph and James Madison. All right. It believes that our new government should have a strong national government with 3 branches. Okay, they're going to have a legislative branch to pass the laws, and it's going to have 2 houses. But here's the rub: each of the house is going to be based on population. Population, how many people are in the state, is going to determine how many people are in the legislature. All right. They propose an executive to carry out the laws, because remember, that's what an executive does. He enforces the laws. The legislature makes the laws or passes the laws, but the executive carries out the laws. And finally, unlike the Articles of Confederation, it's going to have a judicial system or a system of courts. Remember, one of the big problems with the Articles of Confederation, there was no ability to solve disputes between states. All right? So this is the Virginia Plan. And it is absolutely opposed by the small states. They don't like this idea at all. Well, the small states come up with a plan, and it's called the New Jersey Plan. New Jersey Plan, proposed by William Patterson of New Jersey. It also calls for a strong national government with 3 branches. So that far, so far, both of those plans are the same. Strong national government with 3 branches. Here's the difference. They propose a 1-house legislature, and each state only gets 1 vote. no matter if you have 10 million people or you have 500,000 people. You're only going to get one vote. Okay, so one house legislature. They agree that they do need an executive to carry out the laws, as well as a judicial system, those court systems. Okay? They thought this was a better plan for the small states, but once again, then large states think that this is unfair. So now we have two systems that have been proposed, and neither side can agree. So Virginia and New Jersey start to punch each other. No, just kidding. But they can't agree. What happens, though, is the Great Compromise. You're going to see this a lot. In America, we have people with different ideas based on whatever is important to their cause. But what's been great about America is that we have had the ability to compromise. All right? So the Great Compromise is proposed by Roger Sherman. He calls for a two-house legislature, kind of like the Virginia plan. But here's the difference. The lower house, known as the House of Representatives, okay, is going to be based on population. So large states are going to have more people in the House of Representatives than small states because it's based on population. But they're going to have an upper house, which is known as the Senate. And each state, no matter how big, is going to have 2 senators, which means 2 votes. And both sides go, we can live with this. This is a good idea. Everybody gets something. All right? And guess what? This passes. Well, just like the small states and large states have differences of opinion, the North and the South are going to have a disagreement, and this is going to be over slavery. Slavery. All right? You need to remember that in the House of Representatives, it's going to be based on population. Population. Right? So would slaves be counted as part of the population? And would the slave trade be allowed to continue? Well, in the North, they do not want to count slaves as population, right? And here's why. Because remember, the only people that can serve in the House of Representatives are white males, right? White males. So if you are going to count all the slaves towards population, yet they can't serve, you're going to still elect white males that favor slavery, right? So the North does not want to count slaves because the South says they aren't citizens. The South has said that they are property. Therefore, they should not be counted as population. Well, the South says, oh, no. Slaves should be counted only for population. They agree that they should not be allowed to vote or have citizen or natural rights, of course, but they want to count them for population because they would be able to elect more white men who have their same ideas, that Southern idea, and, unfortunately, slavery. So once again, you see another compromise, and this one's a little odd. It's called the 3/5 compromise. 3/5 compromise. All right? The South says they're not going to sign this if they don't get their way. And the North says, well, that's baloney. We're not going to allow you to count all your slaves as population so you can basically, stock the House of Representatives with a bunch of slave lovers. All right? But remember, it's hot. It's summer. The Northerners are sitting in their woolen suits. They are suffering. The South says, fine, we can just wait you out. So finally, in that last part, I'm just kind of speculating on. But in the end, they come up with a compromise. The North says, fine, or the South even agrees to this, that we will count 3/5 of a slave as a person for population only. 3/5 of a person? Well, that doesn't make sense. Think about it this way. If you have 5,000 slaves, then 3,000 of them will be counted towards the population. Okay? Oops, population. Okay. So they agree on that. So that's called the Three-Fifths Compromise. Three-Fifths Compromise. They'll count 3/5 of the slave population towards actual population. All right. Well, the South says then, okay, fine, if we agree to this, we're not happy about it because we wanted to count them all as population. But we'll agree to that as long as Congress promises they will not, and I know these chains look like they're right over my words there. I'm sorry about that. Congress promises not to outlaw the slave trade for the next 20 years. So for the next 20 years, they're still going to be able to go to West Africa and bring slaves against their will, Africans against their will, into the Americas. All right? So that's the two compromises between North and South. The Three-Fifths Compromise for population, and then the slave trade is going to be allowed to continue for the next 20 years. One other item I want to mention before we go is that the North also agrees, and this is going to come into play especially later on towards the Civil War, but the North agrees that no state could keep a fugitive slave or a runaway slave from being returned to an owner who claimed that slave. In other words, if a slave is able to run away to the North, and a slave owner, the person that owned the slave, said, hey, that's my slave, then the North has agreed that they would return that person back into bondage. Okay, so the big issues, have been resolved. The debates between the northern states and the southern states, between the large states and the small states, have been resolved. But, there's lots of things they still have to decide on. What's this new executive? What's it going to be? Is it going to be kind of like a king? Is it going to be, they don't know what it's going to be. They come up with the idea of the president. They don't know how long he should be able to run. Should be able to run for 2 years, for 10 years, for 4 years. Well, they come up with the idea of 4 years, all right? And then they'd have to be up for re-election. They have to decide on how Congress is going to be paid. I mean, it's a lot of little details. And these guys do a great job because it takes them 4 months to argue every one of these points. But at last, on September 17th, 1787, which is Constitution Day, it is ready to sign. Now, 3 people don't sign this, okay? Who was it? Edmund, Randolph, and George Mason, I remember that for sure. And there's one other, did not sign it because they thought this gave the federal government too much power. So they don't sign, okay? But the rest of them do. Now, before it can go into effect, though, each state has to hold a convention. Okay, has to hold a convention to approve it. And once, remember, because Articles of Confederation are still kind of hanging there. And remember, under the Articles of Confederation, 9 of the 13 states had to approve. So once 9 of the states approve this, it will become the government. But right now, we still don't know if they're going to sign it or not. So 9 of the 13 must approve before this new system of government goes into effect.